In an earlier chapter, we looked at the for next statement, and that's when we wanted our code to loop a set number of times. So we used my counter, and we said that we wanted it to loop either 2 times or we wanted it to loop 3 times based on a counter. This is not that. This is something different. This is for each member in a collection. So this can be for each sheet in a collection of sheets, or each cell in a range of cells. I want to start with each cell in a range of cells. I've opened up the file Budget 2 and I've saved it as Chapter 6. I've then also moved to the sheet called Budget 2012 and I've moved to the cell D7. The whole idea here is I'd like to bring up a sub-procedure called Change to Bold. If we go to our code file, you will find Change to Bold, and I'm going to highlight that particular sub to End sub and copy it. I'll go back to my Visual Basic editor, I'll insert a module, and I'll paste that in. And I'll bring up my Excel. So the whole idea here is I'm declaring my cell as a range. And then for each my cell in the sheet Budget 2012 and in the range D7 to U12 in that collection of cells, if my cell's value is greater than 100, then I want the font to be bold, I want the interior color to be blue, and I want the font color to be white. Else, if my cells, otherwise make my font not bold, make my interior color yellow, and make my font color green. Then it simply ends the if and grabs the next cell in the collection of cells D7 to U12. And I find the indenting helps a lot. So the idea here is I'll click on the sub-procedure and I'll press F8. Actually, before I press F8, I'm actually going to add to this particular code. What I'd like this code to do is actually move to each cell so I can actually see it physically doing it. So I'm just going to put a statement after this that says my cell full stop select. So it selects it and I can actually see it doing it. And then I'll just select this lot and tab it in a little bit further. So let's try this. When I press F8, if the cell value in D7 is greater than 100, it's bold, it's blue background and white text. In the if, grab the next cell, select the cell. If it's greater than 100, bold, blue, white. And then just keep pressing F8 and it will continue to work through all the cells in the collection of cells D7 to U12. And thankfully I got it to move to each one because it goes quite a way. So you keep pressing F8. But after a while, you get a sore finger. I'm just actually going to hold it down for a while until it hits a value that's not greater than 100, so you can see it's actually working. Here we go. We can see it's working on those values that are not greater than 100. At this point, you may just decide to press F8 and to just run it. F5, sorry, and just run it. But before we do that, I might show you a breakpoint. I'm going to click here. This is a breakpoint. This takes it off, this puts it on. If I press F5, the code runs but stops. If I then press F5 again, it runs and stops, runs and stops. So that means I'm having to press F5 once instead of F8 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so many times. The breakpoint just means it'll run and then it'll stop at that point, and then when you press F5 it'll run and stop at that point. So if you sort of want to not hurt your fingers by constantly tapping F8, you could put some breakpoints in. And then if I take that breakpoint off and then just press F5 without it on, it'll just race through and do the whole lot. That is an example of a for each cell in a collection of cells. What I'd like to do now is show you how we actually work with each sheet in a collection of sheets. I'd like to go to my Excel code file and I'd like to grab another sub-procedure called set borders, and I'll copy that and I'll paste that into here. Now let's have a look. This will declare my sheet as a worksheet and declare my cell as a range. Alright. and I just indent things. For each sheet in the Active Workbooks worksheets, it's going to set my cell as the range D7 to U12. Once it's set that range, it's going to put a double medium thickness red border around D7 to U12. Then it'll go to the next sheet and it'll put another border around that range, and the next sheet and put another border around. So what I'd like to do here again is actually ask it to move to the sheet. My sheet, full stop, select, so I can see it working. I may also put a breakpoint about there, and let's have a look. So we're in the first sheet, Budget 2012, and so it's going to put a double medium thickness red border around D7 to U12. Now the other thing is, I should explain how come I know it's red. RGB stands for red, green and blue. The maximum number you can have is 255 and the minimum number is 0. So there's 255 for red, 0 for green and 0 for blue. So that means that's red. But if you want to know how you make colours by mixing these, click on RGB and press F1. When you do so, and I'll just bring it into view, the help will explain the RGB statement. Here it is here, red, green, blue. And as we go down, it has to be a number between 0 and 255. And as we go down, here's different combinations. So if you put 255 red, green and blue, you'll end up with the colour white. If you put 000 on red, green and blue, you'll end up with the colour black. So every colour is some sort of mix of these three primary colours. Yeah. So I'll close out of that. So that's how I knew that was red. So I'm just going to press F8 and it selects the sheet, selects the range and puts a double red border, and there it is there. Then I'll press F8 and it'll go to the next sheet and it'll do that there as well, and it's just done it. If I press F5 it does it but stops and doesn't move to the next sheet. If I then go F5 again, it does it and stops. So it stops as it's done each sheet. If I take the breakpoint off and press F5 and just let it run, you will see that in each sheet in this file, going through to Budget 2017, there is a red double medium thick border around the cells D7 to U12 in each sheet. So that's moving to each sheet in the workbook, and there could be 300, there could be 2 sheets in the workbook. And the breakpoints are really useful as well. Now sometimes we also want to ask the user what range they would like to affect. Instead of saying, in the case of this change to bold sub-procedure, instead of saying this range here, we sometimes want to ask them, what range do you want to affect? So I'm going to go back to my code file and I'm going to choose the code Ask Me. And I'll highlight this here and I'll take a copy and I'll go over to my Visual Basic Editor and I'll paste. The whole idea here is I'm declaring my cell as a range. I'm declaring my selected cells also as a range. I'm setting my selected cells to an application input box. An application input box means I can give it a prompt, enter or select a range. The little dialog box which we'll see has a title, pick a range, and it's expecting a type 8 which is a range. For each cell in that selected cells collection of cells, I want it to select the cell. If the value is numeric and greater than 100, then we want bold, yellow and red. Otherwise, we want bold off, blue interior and yellow font. In the if, end if, in the with, end with, and then it'll go for the next cell. This also, I notice, has an error handle section, which means that if this code should encounter the error number 424, it will exit the sub, and we'll go through that too. But let's just start by pressing F8. If I press F8, here it is here. This is my application input box with the prompt, enter or select a range, with the title, pick a range, and it's expecting a range. So let's go for, say, this range here, where we have a mix of under and over 100. And actually let's include some values that are not numbers. If I then click OK, it's automatically formatted anything that is numeric and is greater than 100 as bold, yellow and red, and anything that's not, which includes text, is blue and yellow and not bold. So it's really nice to be able to create an application input box, and if I press F8 again or even F5, I can choose whichever range. I can type it if I want or drag over it and it will automatically format it.